Hi guys, fantasy artist Ed Beer Jr. and also automotive muralist. A lot of you guys have been following this progress report updates on the Shanna Marie. This is Jim Keeley's 1978 Chevy van, pirate theme piece. I've been showing you little clippets as we go, step by step, showing you the amount of time and effort and detail that's being put in this. I'm definitely making this an opus piece for me as far as my career piece is concerned. So I am going over the top, way over the top when it comes to detail. But a lot of you have private messaged me and emailed me and so forth and said, hey Ed, would you do any kind of live demo of even a small segment? So that's what we're gonna do. I'm working on one of the collars of the pirate jacket here of JP, Captain JP. So I'm gonna show you how I work this from the darks to lights. And we're dealing with a black van, so we're working with a black base, and I'm gonna bring out the shadows and the highlights. Now keep in mind, the light source is coming from over here in this piece. There's a lantern here that's projecting light. So this particular side, this right side of the collar, is going to get a lot more highlights than the left side would be. I've already done the left side. You can come in real close and you can see what I've done here. I've added just a mid-tone gray and created some highlights to give it some feel of folds and depth. And that's what I'm going to do over here right now. So here we go, guys. By the way, I'm using a Vega 2000. It's a really cheap, inexpensive airbrush. I don't even think about breaking out the Iwata unless I'm doing some ridiculously tiny piece. So most of the time, just a good old workhorse will do the job. The rest is handled by hand brushwork with either 000 or 00 brushes. All right, so once again, highlights coming in on this side. I have here what's going to be a button and a stitch area, and I've got to do what I did here, which is highlight around it to give it a feeling of embossment or depth. But I do see that this right here is bending, so we're going to go in right away with this, keeping in mind I got to leave a shadow here. Now this side of the collar is the side that eventually is going to be in the blue moonlight, which of course is the curse of the Davy Jones moonlight. So what I do is I go right around this frisket, and that's what this is. It's a little frisket. So if you come over here, you can see the drawing. I've drawn this all out ahead of time, and I use this transparent adhesive film to block off areas that I do not want to hit with airbrush, and that's an example of the button and that trim. That's what I'm working on. So back over here, highlight where I know the light's going to hit a little bit. And I go back in and add shadows with black after I've completed the mid-tones and highlights. You know, this is a really painstaking process because I'm making sure that every possible crevice is handled. You know, realistically, you could get away with not doing most of this that I'm doing, you know, the hand brush work and whatnot. But then again, it wouldn't be the super high detailed magnification, break out the magnifying glass work that I am known for. And by the way, it's totally natural, it's normal to get constant clogs in the airbrush. There's no magic here, guys. This works the same way for me as it does for any other person that's just starting to pick up an airbrush. This is not an exact science. Materials dry out, they clog in the tip. I'm constantly removing and taking apart this airbrush and cleaning the tips, oiling the needles to make sure that the paint flows clearly and doesn't build up. And every now and then I'll blast out any spots and I'll prep it ahead of time here on this block off scrap paper. And a lot of times I'll just go over it and over and over and to build it up. Because again, we're dealing with a black base, so it takes a lot to build it up and get those colors to work. See, it's starting to clog on me. Blast it over here, come back over, and back it's back again. Now I'm using a waterborne paint, PPG's Enviro Base. I got out of using solvents quite a few years ago. I just couldn't take it, my lungs couldn't take it. And ever since they've been working right on the lines of the big automotive companies, it's been fantastic. They've really mastered the development of the water-based products. Now, of course, you got to be in the right climate. Right now, right now I'm in, what is it, like 9 degrees real feel out there, the wind chill and everything. So I'm inside a garage that is not insulated. I've got a couple of kerosene heaters and electric heaters going on, and I'm just about at 60 degrees. There are certain minimums you can't paint below. I think the ideal is 65, 60, 65. So I'm right within that tolerance area. I'm just going to fade this out, leaving just enough for the shadow of this color here. And then when I go in and put the highlights in, I'll bring that out a little stronger. Blast again. This side of the collar is a little more rickety too. It's going to have a lot of mollusks, mussels, and different types of aquatic life growing off of it because, again, it's that undead side. Now I'll stop for a moment. I'll take my cap off the front of my airbrush, use my nail, pick off any buildup that has dried from all that airflow. Put the cap back on, nozzle, blast a little bit, go back in. Now, just like over here, I've got these little, like, you could say airbrush balls going on. That's kind of the trim of the leather work. And I'm going to put that in over here now. So I'll start with up here. And these are just slight impressions for now, because we're going to go in later with the brush and detail them. Right now we're just blocking this stuff in, doing the basics. All the magic happens truthfully when the final highlights are put in and the detailed brushwork is put in. Okay, now I go back in the highlight line. Blast away, come back over here. Looks like it's time to clear the nozzle again. And this is just like a ritual. Now, not only that, every now and then you got to go over, take the paint out, filter it, thin it out a little bit because it will start to get a little heavy, too thick in viscosity to run through the airbrush. A lot of maintenance that goes on with airbrushing. I don't care what you're using. Iwata, Pash, or Pache, Crescendo, whatever you use, don't matter. It's going to do this. That's the nature of paint. When air is blowing through it. lightly hit this, not a lot, just a little bit. Doesn't have to be that dark. Dark, as we say in New England. Okay, so that is pretty good for the base as far as the base is concerned. I'm now going to go back in with the highlights. And you'll see how the magic goes another level. Working on stage 2 of the collar on this Captain JP of the 1978 Chevy van that I've been working on for JP and for Jim Keeley. So the last video segment showed me putting in your basic grays over the black base of the van. I want to mention too that anytime you're adding color on top of a black base, it's always going to get absorbed and be way darker than it started off with in the jar. So you have to calculate that in when you're mixing your colors. So I laid in the base gray to give some highlights and some shape to the color. I'm now going to put the highlights in, because again the light source is coming from a lantern that's right here projecting this way. So I've come up with a light yellow cream, and that's going to be my highlight color that I'm going to start to add in right now. Going over it so I build up enough of a highlight. Now, one thing about whites, they tend to be a lot heavier, they're more opaque, therefore they'll sometimes spit. These are the things you got to deal with, and you got to go over it and clean it up. Again, if things start to get a little too heavy, you just stop and you go back over and you thin it out. And try to get that correct consistency before it gets too thin and starts to splatter and web and spider. And that perfect consistency that flows nicely and gives you a nice highlight. Clean it out a little bit. So I blast on the side. So this looks like it's starting to dry up, so we're gonna go back to the nozzle. Clean off anything that's building up at the edge. I may actually have to thin this paint out. And we're back. Now I'm also on this side getting a lot of blue highlights. If you look up here, it goes from yellow to the blue tints on the hat, and those blue tints will have to be incorporated a little bit into the edge here where it folds over and all the way down that beaded trim. That'll be one of the follow-up stages. One of the things I like to do is I like to cross-check the coloring and how light I'm getting compared to something else. So this is the color I'm matching. I'm trying to match the upper color. So as you can see, I'm going to be putting in some more yellows after the fact, because right now this is far more yellow. I also have some brown and reds in there. Those will all be added. But right now, I'm just working on the highlight. So I'm using a much more white base. I can go back in and tint, no problem at all. So again, I just keep putting those highlights in until I build it up to where I'm satisfied. Now, stepping back, you can see again, it's still not that warm yellow, but that's okay because right now I've just gotten some highlights in and I'm pretty happy with what I've gotten highlights. Now I'm gonna go on to this side, which again, just incorporated the gray midtones that I put in, and I'm now gonna put in some more highlights. Now this side is kind of in shadow, so there won't be a lot of highlights, just a few. Just a touch of it. Because again, the light coming in from this side, it's only going to be kind of hitting up here. So I've actually started to put those highlights in right there. Highlighted those beads. Soften that line. Just a little bit more highlight in there. Widen that highlight just a little. Now, I started doing this little bead work. I'm going to continue it. Some more highlights. The last time we did this, we put in the gray. Putting in braided yellow. Now, again, cleaning the nozzle, something you got to do all the time. I also like to check to make sure that I don't have any paint buildup in the center there. A little bit, but it's not distorting that circle shape hole, which is crucial to getting a nice line. Edge of the collar is what's going to hit a lot of light. So, step back, take a look. I'm pretty happy with these values here. The highlight, the light coming in from this side from the lantern. I do want to put this a little bit brighter here though, because I feel like since the lantern's right here, it would hit that, especially since this cuff, or the collar bends a little bit. So I go back in, brighten that highlight a little bit, because I gotta remember, I'm gonna go back over all of this with a yellow and a brown. So it's gonna darken some of these highlights that I've got. All right, guys, we'll check with you in a few minutes. I've now switched the color to a red-orange. In fact, take a look inside. You can actually see the color. This is what I'm going to be using to tint the collars to bring in some of the warmer tones. You can see some of those warm tones that are in here a little bit. You can see it even in here. I'll get out of the light so you guys can see. It's just got a little bit of a yellowish, brown, reddish color in there. So this is what I do. That'll soften this cool color a little bit and get it a little warmer. It's not everywhere, but I put it on the dark side, a lot of the shadows. Very subtle. I use a very thinned out kind of a tint, almost like if it was oils, it'd be a glazing. So we're really just lightly tinting, just to bring some warm colors in. And here's an example. I'm trying to match this. I'm doing my best to. This is what I had done prior, the upper collar and now the lower collar. So I think we've got a pretty good combination there. We got some of the same colors picked up. Now I'm going to go over to the right collar, his left, and I'm going to add some colors in here. That brownish orange. Again, just warming it up. Our friskets that we it keeps coming up on me. Even in here, I'll bring some of that. Very subtle, but it ties everything in. And by the way, I'm using a color cup on this because it's a very small amount of paint. I don't need to have a bottle jar with a siphon hose. And I use a bottom feed airbrush most of the time. I do have an Iwata SBS side mounted color cup. Okay. I'm gonna stop for a minute, take a look here, see if I got a pretty close comparison. I think I'm gonna add a little more brown up here. So don't forget, this is the side I'm gonna add a lot of blue tints. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm gonna go quickly over here to switch this out. Notice my very organized color spectrum and workstation. You know, the key to accuracy and detail and quality workmanship is a well-organized paint table and mixing bench. So I have everything in a complete organized fashion. Here we have the blue that I'm looking for. This is going to be my moonlight highlight blue. Now it looks like pretty intense there, but once it's sprayed, it fades right out. Now, blue moonlight, which is coming from the window over here where all the blue kind of cursed moonlight is going to come in on this side. So everything that the light's going to touch on facing that side is going to get hit with a little bit of this blue. And I have a little bit of in here. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little bit in there. It's very subtle. And I have a little bit of it up here. And so even across the hat. So that's what I'm going to do here. This side of the inside of the collar is going to get hit with it. Test it a little bit, make sure I'm good, and I go right in. Helps me create another fold too. Fade out right about there. That's about right. Now we're going to go over to this side. Now this collar is going to get filled with all kinds of mussels and clams and different types of aquatic nature because of the curse. I mentioned that before, so I'm leaving a lot of space available for that later. Now I'm going to go into these beads because this is going to get hit with the high blue, the strong blue. I'm going to pull this tape down a little bit. There we go. So just like I did with the bright yellow, the cream yellow, I'm doing this with the blue on this side for this stitch work or bead work. And again, after I go back in with the brush, that is the fine liner, all this stuff will really pop. This is kind of like your secondary stage, kind of a multi-stage process. But that's the difference when you use your Friscuits and you use the actual line brushwork on top of the airbrush, you get a really super clean, crisp line. You get the idea. So I'll check with you in just a little bit and we'll go to the next step. All right, guys, so we're moving on. I just took off all the frisk film that was blocking off the rest of his jacket to expose just his collars that we just worked on. And so now you can really see how things pop and how the shadows and the light effects really come through and pull forward the shapes. Again, that lantern light coming in through here, hitting this side more. A little bit of the blue reflective light coming in through here because again, moonlight's coming in on this side, and a lot of blue coming on the inside fold of his collar there. So next step, now that I've removed these Friscuits from the lapels and the buttons, I'm going to start working on it. I just laid in some brown here and I'm going to do the same thing over there. This is where you break out the paintbrush, the liner. Now I'm dealing right now with a straight liner. I think it's a 001. What do we got here? I'm sorry, I have a 4. I've just shaved it down. Anyway, so simple as this. You just see, you don't worry about the fact that you're going to make it go a little graphic. What you're doing right now is to define shapes. I'm also going to have a lot of blue on the opposite side. All I'm doing now is just kind of adding what will be reflections on the brass. Okay, so that is the first coat, which is just basic brown, and that's going to let this dry a little bit. Then I'm going to go back in with a secondary color just to define lines a little more, following that up with the blue reflection on specifically on the button on this side, and on this side we're going to highlight with the lighter tones of the highlight, that cream color that we had before. And again, it's all brushwork at this point. Alright guys, we'll see you in just a bit. Alright, so I've put in a kind of a lighter orange brown to work on these brass buttons. I'm going in with the airbrush to take that work that I did with the liner brush and kind of highlight it up. We got a few more stages left to go when it comes to the lining work, but for now, I wanted to show you the stage. It's almost like an orange. Again, I'm trying to remember where my light source is coming from. All right, now I'm going over to the other side. All right, now we're gonna switch off the color to yellow. All right guys, so now I'm gonna add a highlight yellow. It's got a little stronger yellow in it. It's not quite a white or a light cream, but it's just got enough of yellow. This kind of thing requires a lot of patience. You gotta wait for it to build up slowly. Slightest move, pull too hard on that trigger and you blow it. Gotta wait for that airbrush to just kick in just enough. Alright, be back in a second with the next step. Now I'm going in with an even brighter white yellow. Side. Alright, back with the brush work after the blue. Alright, now I'm going to add a little bit of blue reflective light because we have a lot of blue going on here from the moonlight. Do a hint of that. And there you go. Now I'll go in with the brush. So guys, I've been doing this line work. And all this is a little bit of crispness. Help define that button. So there you have it. Now we'll move on to the next one. So now I'm going to work on putting a little blue, again moonlight, because this button would reflect that. It's not strong, it's just a subtle. Just like that. So now I'm going to add some highlight to this leather strap in the center as we got the light coming in here, right about there. don't worry about a little overspray because you're going to go back in with your fine liner. As I said, we're going to go back in with the liner and redefine. Like that. Alright, so now that I've gotten most of my highlights and basic airbrush done, now it's almost exclusively line work. And just like I did right in here, I went down through here and redefined that line. I'm going to do the same thing right here. So this is what gives it that crisp look. Extra little attention to the line details. This is also what takes an enormous amount of time. But you don't do it, it looks great from 30 feet away, you're not going to do the magnifying test unless you put these kind of details in. People say to me, oh my God, it takes you so long to do a project. How do you ever make any money? Well, first off, I don't do any projects unless they're big dollar projects anyways, because you're absolutely right. The amount of time it takes would simply be not cost effective. Doesn't make any sense. This kind of work is for the client who wants the best out there. They want to be the ultimate trophy winner. They want, upon incredibly close inspection, to blow people's minds away. About this stuff is it looks good from a distance and it looks good up close. I actually have a hell of a lot of fun hiding things within my pieces, hidden objects. In fact, on this one here I've got a whole bunch of cool skulls and reapers and things like that, so that'll be a little bit of a project for everybody to go find. Anyways, that's the idea. And now I'll go back in also with this after I've done this line work and redefine these lines once I've finished with this part of the jacket with a bright blue highlight, kind of like this line up here at the hat. So that's got to be done on all of these outer edges because that's where the moonlight comes in. So this is yet still not finished, but it gives you certainly an idea of where we're going with it. Again, in order to get the crisp separations of each component of the clothing, you gotta hand draw it out, which by the way, every single thing you see here, this drawing of J.P. Keeley, this is actually a photograph that was provided to me of just his face. I took a shot of his body. Of course the compressor has to go off at this moment. Anyways, I took a photograph of his body in position. He was just dressed with a t-shirt, and I had to create this costuming, all of this design work here, and it's 100% from my imagination. I used no reference whatsoever, zero reference. Everything that's on this van has zero reference other than the photographs of the portraiture. I literally just sit down with a blank sheet of paper and draw. From that point, of course, I create a storyline in my mind of how this is all going to work out. And from that point, it's just literally layering and layering and layering, doing each component from back to front on the van as I go. The idea in my mind is the more dependent you are on reference, the more it's going to look like something that someone else sooner or later is going to find, whether it's in a book or a magazine or otherwise. My work is always going to be 100% original, and that, to me, is what makes it special for the client, because they can honestly say, this is not something that's from a movie, this is not something from a magazine, this is not something from a pin-up calendar or otherwise hot rod car calendar. This is 100% unique. Now, I'm not talking about technical stuff, like when it comes to automotive drawing and stuff, but I will even say that there is a flintlock on here, which you'll be seeing at the end of this video clip, because I've included some photographs, still shots of everything I've done so far all the way around the van. But it's 100% my own design. That flintlock is, I just sat down one day at one of the van meets, Keystone actually, without reference, just sat down to start drawing it and designing my own version of it. The more independent you are of reference, the more you have taken the time to memorize things that you see in life, the better you're going to be at this kind of conceptual creation on the spot. So that's what I tend to specialize in, and it's definitely a time-consuming thing. There's no question about it. I'm over 200 hours on this one side alone, but in the end, it'll be a one-of-a-kind, top-shelf piece that I know Mr. Keeley will be and his family will be very proud of. So we'll see you next time. Enjoy the clip with the additional pictures showing you everything that's been done on the vans so far, and we'll get back to you with a step-by-step as we go through this coat jacket and then eventually the portrait. Thanks for watching.